Yo, what is up? You have found We Like the Blazers. I am Brandon Goldner, here by myself. I maybe coordinated with Ryan to do this at 11 o'clock on a Sunday. It is 11:10 on a Sunday, so we will just see if he loops back or what's going on. I will admit that I have been pretty busy, haven't been spending a lot of time anytime on the podcast other than editing. So thank you to Ryan for picking up the slack, and to Steve DeWald, who guested last episode. And then who was before that? Why am I forgetting? I am forgetting who the guest was the time before that. So that's my bad. But we are here to talk about the Blazers, and specifically how the Blazers need to be losing right now. They've really got to dig deep, find that determination, that inner drive, and that will to lose, because it is incredibly and critically important at this point. We're sitting at March 20th, and the Blazers are currently finding themselves in the 7th spot in the lottery odds sweepstakes. I'm going to be bouncing around between a couple windows here, so if I stall for time or if I chunk out for a second, then that's my bad. But here's where things stand now. So we'll talk a little bit about why the Blazers need to lose, what it looks like in the next few games coming up, and then we're going to talk a little bit about draft picks, actually just specifically Chet Holmgren, because I know that's something that Steve and Ryan talked about the last episode. I wish I would have been there to argue for my boy Chet, because I am pretty excited about him, and whatever team gets him, I think is going to be super, super lucky. But we'll talk about that in just a moment. So let's go back to the Blazers and the current landscape of the NBA, and where the Blazers are and where they need to be. So Steve and Ryan did talk a little bit last episode about how the NBA draft lottery works. It has been reworked in recent years, so if you have not been keeping up with the NBA draft lottery rules and how things go, odds and that stuff for the last couple years, things are a little bit different. So let me try to make it as succinct as I can. In the draft lottery, you have 14 teams. So the 14 worst teams in the NBA will be in the draft lottery. And those 14 teams all have a chance to get a top 4 pick. All of those 14 teams have different odds of getting that pick. And if teams shuffle around, it can bump other teams down. So here's how the odds work as it stands right now. To get that top 4 pick, if you are one of the top 3 teams in the lottery odds, which means if you're one of the 3 worst teams, you have a 52% chance, a more than 50-50 chance of getting that top 4 pick. If you're the 4th worst team, it's 48%. And let me go down the list here again. These are the percentages that you can get a top 4 pick. So if you're 1 through 3 worst teams, it's 52%. You're the 4th worst team, it's 48%. 5th worst team is 42%. 6th is 37%. 7th is 32%. 8th is 26%. The tongue twisters, 9th is 20%. 10th is 8%, and it's really getting skinny now. 11th and 12th are about 8%. 13th is about 5%, and 14th is about a 3% chance of landing that top 4 pick. There are also odds that you could get the number 1 overall pick, but just for the purposes of keeping this, as unconfusing as possible, I know that especially on audio, it can be a little bit confusing running through numbers. We'll just stick with the chance of getting a top 4 pick. The Blazers currently find themselves at 7th. Okay, so they find themselves at 7th place, 7th, let's say 7th best lottery odds. Again, this is like the 7th worst team in the NBA, but let's say best lottery odds. We'll say that the higher is better. Okay, they're in 7th right now with a 32% chance of getting that top 4 pick. Now, the Blazers are currently, and this is where it gets really important for tonight on Sunday, March 20th, they are currently 3 games behind Indiana in that odds race. So Indiana is at 5th, 3 games ahead of the Blazers. The Blazers are sitting at 7th. So here's the difference. And I will also say this too, that the Blazers are not going to catch up with the top 4 teams. It just won't happen. They're too far away. They are currently 6.5 back of Oklahoma City, who's in 4th. That's just too much ground to make up. It won't happen. But the Blazers do have a chance to get all the way up to 5th best lottery odds. Okay. So If the Blazers stay where they are, if they stay at 7th, they will have a 32% chance of that top 4 pick. It's not totally out of the question. It's not bad. If they get all the way up to 5th, so if they catch Indiana, by the way, they are playing Indiana tonight. Let's talk about that. But if the Blazers get all the way up to 5th place, they will have a 42% chance of that top 4 pick. The difference between 7th and 5th is the difference between 32% and 42%. That is massive. And so here's what I would do. If you go to tankathon.com, they have an NBA draft lottery simulator, right? You can see the teams as they're currently ordered based on record, and you can hit, simulate the lottery, and you can keep hitting that button over and over again. Look at the teams that pop up in that first 4, okay? So when you hit this over and over again, as I'm doing right now, you'll see occasionally teams jump up. Like, I don't know, like I just see the Kings jumped up, the Pacers jumped up, I hit it again, and the Kings jumped up again, the Pacers jumped up again, the Kings jumped up again, the Pacers jumped up again. Wow, this is a broken record. Portland jumps up. So what you'll notice, though, is that the difference between 32 and 42% is actually pretty significant. If you have one shot, you have one simulation, right? Mom spaghetti, you only got one shot. You want the best odds possible, obviously, of getting this top 4 pick. And now that the lottery odds have been flattened more than they had been a couple years ago, you don't need to be like the worst team in the NBA. In fact, there is absolutely no structural advantage to being either the worst, the second worst, or third worst team in the NBA. And really that advantage, if you're 4th or 5th, is pretty negligible-ish. I mean, more so than in years past, right? Like it's flatter now. It's more likely that even if you're not like the absolute worst team, you have a chance at one of those top picks. It is so critical for the Blazers right now to be losing every possible game they can. I do not care if you want the Blazers to win because you support the team and you love the team and you want to see them win and you want, like, I'm being rude right now. I don't care if that's what you want because that's not what you should want. Because I mean, look, I want that too. I always want the Blazers to win. I have never been in a position where I've been actively rooting for the Blazers to lose. I've never felt that in my whole life. Until now, until today, it is so critically important that the Blazers lose as many games as possible. And tonight is a perfect example of that. So actually not tonight, this afternoon at 12:30, I am recording at 11:15 in the AM. The Blazers are playing the Indiana Pacers. If the Blazers win this game, which we do not want them to do, then the Blazers will find themselves 4 games back of Indiana for that 5th best lottery spot. If the Blazers lose this game, which we do want them to do, they will only be 2 games back of that 5th lottery spot. That is a massive, massive swing. Those games are going to be almost impossible to make up. It's actually really annoying to say that like every game is a must win or every game is a must lose. We are really getting into the point where like nearly every single game coming up is a must lose situation. So as I'm looking, again, it's March 20th. They haven't played Indiana yet. Here are the games remaining. They're playing Indiana today. Then they're playing Detroit, San Antonio, Houston, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Dallas, Utah. This is a really odd stretch of the season. And if this would be the stretch of the season if the Blazers were trying to win, they would be able to pick up many of these games. If in an alternate universe in which Damian Lillard weren't hurt, in which basically that, right? If Damian Lillard weren't hurt and this Blazers team were gunning for wins, you could ostensibly see the Blazers win every last one of those games, Dallas and Utah, the last 2 games being the hardest by far. But all of those other teams, not New Orleans, but basically all of those other teams are trying to lose. You could also make an argument for San Antonio that just institutionally they're not trying to lose because Greg Popovich wants to get more wins. I don't know. He already passed. He's already the winningest coach in regular season history, so who knows? But when you're looking at this schedule, I mean, these are all, unfortunately, very winnable games to the Blazers. And if the Blazers somehow manage to lose a large chunk of these games, they'll be in really good shape. Probably the most. So Houston. Okay, so you have two parts of this too, right? You have the Blazers losing as much as they can. That's definitely part of it. But so many of these games are also, if the other team wins, then they get pushed up in those lottery odds. So let's talk about this two different ways. The Blazers losing and then the other team being pushed up. As far as the other team being pushed up, there are three teams on that list where it will not matter. The Detroit Pistons, the Houston Rockets, and the Oklahoma City Thunder. That makes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those games. It won't matter whether or not those teams win because the Blazers cannot catch them anyway functionally. Okay, so those only matter from perspective of Blazers increasing their losses. Where it definitely does matter is with San Antonio, the Pelicans, definitely this Pacers game. If you look at San Antonio, they are effectively tied with the Blazers right now. It is critical that the Blazers drop both of those games to the Spurs. Now, on the other side, all three of them. On the other side, you could say that San Antonio, if they're really trying to lose, they feel the exact same way. Probably true. Then you go to the New Orleans Pelicans. This gets kind of complicated because remember, the Blazers will get the Pelicans draft pick unless it's in the top 4 or unless it is nowhere else in the lottery. If the Pelicans make the playoffs, the Blazers do not get that pick. If the Pelicans somehow jump up in the top 4, the Blazers do not get that pick. So the Blazers really need, where the Pelicans are right now, they're so close to the play-in, and the Lakers are trying to win and they're not able to win. The Pelicans were rooting for losses right now, I think is where we're at. Although the Blazers only find themselves 2.5 games ahead of them in the lottery race odds. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, first of all, the Blazers should lose all of these games. That would be best case scenario. Then it's like, okay, the ones against Houston and the ones against Oklahoma City matter slightly less because those teams getting wins won't do anything. The games that are absolutely critical are the Indiana game today, all three of those San Antonio games, and both of those New Orleans Pelicans games. Those ones, if you're rooting for, you got to pick a handful to lose. Those are the ones you want them to lose because it both pushes the Blazers down. It pushes those other teams up, which increases the Blazers' lottery odds. Now, again, so much of this is outside of our control, right? It's the same thing as with free agency. It's the same thing as with the draft lottery. It's the same thing, frankly, with anything in basketball when we have a rooting interest in something. We don't have any control over it. I totally understand that. And there has been some criticism of people being like, I don't understand why you're rooting for losses. You can't control it anyway. Well, you can't control any of this. None of us can control any of this, right? Like, we don't have any say over whether, I don't know why I'm talking like this. Oh, Mickey Mouse. We don't have any say over what happens here. So the point is, when you're thinking of what you want to have happen, which is what we all do as fans anyway, because we don't actually impact the game, we want the Blazers to lose. We need them to lose. It's critically important. And in the case I would make, okay, Brandon, you've said over and over again how important it is. Why does it matter that much? The case I would make is this. Look at where the Blazers are heading into this summer. Damian Lillard is up for an extension. Damian Lillard had abdominal surgery. Damian Lillard didn't look like himself after the Olympics or even during the Olympics and didn't look like himself this season. Damian Lillard claimed after he had the surgery that he's been dealing with this for many, many years. And more than that, he claimed that now that he's recovering from the surgery, that he didn't actually realize how injured he was and that he believes that he is going to be physically in better shape than he has been in many years, and that he believes his best years are ahead of him. Now, first of all, that's what a player coming off of an injury will say. It's very seldom you're going to hear a player come off an injury and be like, yeah, I'm not going to be as good. Like, they're just not going to say that, and why would they? But it is true that Damian Lillard has been dealing with his injury for a long time, and so it's totally plausible that he could come back physically more, able to move, basically, right, than he has before, and that he could look like the all-NBA player that he's been for many, many years. So if that happens, that's the first part of when we're thinking about the Blazers' future that it matters. The second thing that I would say, the way I would construct this, and you can disagree with this if you want, is the Blazers should do everything they can to maximize Damian Lillard's prime. If you do believe he's going to come back as an all-NBA player, if you believe that his game will age well, if you believe that he has 3 or 4 more years of being maybe not quite, like second team all-NBA, but like close, like 3 or 4 years of that, then you kind of have to mash the pedal and get as much out of those years from Damian Lillard as you possibly can. Okay, we have that. Then you have that the Blazers have a number of players who look like legitimate, good rotation or above level players, and some of them have upside. So Josh Hart, he has been playing so well, as the best player on this team, with Anthony Simons being out, Damian Lillard being out, that Nurkic being out. He has looked like the best player on a poor team, which is, that's really good. And he said himself, I see myself, I know my place in the NBA, I see myself as a 2.5, option 2.5, right, is what Josh Hart said. So Josh Hart is definitely, he's in his mid-20s. He's going to be just as good next year as this year, barring something weird happening. So you got that. Anthony Simons was literally, as the best player on the team before he went out with injury, he was looking like a right around an all-star, a low all-star level player, and he has upside. So maybe he comes back even better next year. That's insane. Nas Little, before he got hurt, was looking like a legitimate rotation player, a super energy, hustle, can shoot, looking like a really, really good player. Yusuf Nurkic, when he was like the best-ish player out there for a while, he single-handedly got the Blazers wins that they didn't deserve and frankly probably shouldn't have gotten this year. If he continues to mature and it seems like the fact that he's sitting out, it kind of makes me think that there's like a wink nod between Blazers GM Joe Cronin and Nurkic's camp that they're going to offer him something this offseason. If he comes back and he's matured a little bit, and he's still physically the same player, that's a good piece too. And then you have these like weirdo question marks. I can't tell if they're just good because the Blazers are so bad, or if they're actually going to be good, but they are extremely young. So you have like Trenton Watford, who has been just, again, looking, in a team that has almost no talent right now. And sorry, I said Trenton, it's Trendon. He has been looking like an NBA player, question mark. I don't know. He's 6'8", he's 21 years old. He's had a couple of games where he's had 20 plus, 20-7, 20-8, something like that, and has looked like he belonged on an NBA court. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter for you, but what a great piece to have coming off the bench next year if you've stocked up on your talent. Brandon Williams, he's only 6'2", which is funny to say because it's I know another Brandon who's also 6'2", me, but pretty small for an NBA player, whatever. He's 6'2". He's 22 years old. I'm not really sure how much room the Blazers have for another short point guard, given they have Dame and Anthony Simons, but he's been getting 26 assists, 26 and 5. What's this one line that he played against Brooklyn, 37 minutes, had 24, 6 and 5 with 3 steals and a block. It's could he be a rotation NBA player? I don't know. Yeah, sure. Maybe. There have been moments where Drew Eubanks has looked like a legit NBA player. Go Oregon State, an undersized center or maybe a power forward, but he's also had a run of games where his numbers have looked really good. Now, all this is with a grain of salt because the Blazers have had virtually, and no offense to these guys, I'm not trying to put them down or anything, but have had very little talent on the floor, but they look like they belonged. Justice Winslow, in his time on the court, he has looked like he's belonged. Joe Ingles is someone who is old and injured, and it sounds like he wants to come back to Portland next year, but boy, even 90% or 85% of Joe Ingles would be a huge help to this team. I'm saying all this because when you look at next year with who the Blazers currently have on roster, they have a team that is not a ton of super high end talent, but is deep. That doesn't really win you playoff games, though. So then we finally get back to why the Blazers need to lose so badly. So then you go to this. go back to Tankathon and hit that sim button over and over again. Remember that when the New Orleans pick lands in the top 4, the Blazers don't get it. Remember, if the Pelicans make the postseason, the Blazers don't get it. It is helpful that on Tankathon they actually have the little thing that shows if New Orleans pick lands in the top 4. It just says New Orleans. If it lands anywhere outside the top 4, it says New Orleans, and then an arrow pointing to Portland. So if the Blazers increase their lottery odds as much as humanly possible, then the Blazers are increasing their odds as much as humanly possible that they get a top 4 pick. And there, in my view, is generational talent in this draft. If you want to learn more kind of player by player, go back and listen to the last episode of We Like the Blazers that had Steve DeWald and Ryan on it, because they go through it really well. But I want to focus on one Chet Holmgren. Okay, so and I'm getting a little scattered. I have no notes. I'm doing this one take, Jake. But the point being, the difference between, for example, if the Blazers, let's say that they win too many games, okay? The Blazers are actually only, let's take a look here. They are 3 games out. Well, let's say 3.5 games out of being in 12th. So while if they lose to the Pacers tonight, they'll only be 2 games back of 5th. They are also 3.5 games out of 12th. And by the way, if they win today, not only are they further away from 5th, they are a half game closer to 12th. If the Blazers get 12th, then their odds of a top 4 pick are 8%. Forget it. It's probably not going to happen. If the Blazers stay right where they are at 7th, it's 32%. If the Blazers get to 5th, it's 42%. That is a massive, massive difference. So again, when you keep hitting the sim lottery button, the reason why it's so important they lose these games, imagine the roster I just talked about. Imagine Damian Lillard's better, Josh Hart, Yusuf Nurkic, Anthony Simons, Nas Little, Trendon Watford, Brandon Williams, name the players. Like, little bit of depth. They got some top end talent. They have some, especially with Ant and Nas, you have people who are ostensibly going to even get better, which is pretty exciting. Imagine that team, and then imagine the Blazers do too well, and they end up getting like the 12th or the 11th pick, and then, really bad luck, and the New Orleans pick lands in the top 4. If the Blazers come out of this draft lottery with only the 12th pick or only the 11th pick or only the 10th pick, what do you have? You have this exact same team, everyone I just named, plus a player that won't be ready to contribute, probably. A player that will probably never be, the odds say they probably won't ever be like a super high impact player. There's actually, I should have pulled this up, but you can look at historically, like based on where someone was drafted, the percentage chance that they'll be an all-star or all-NBA or what have you. And really, of course, the highest impact players are like in the top 4, top 5, top 6. If the Blazers only get like a 12th, 11th, or 10th pick out of this and luck falls the wrong way and they don't get the New Orleans pick, the Blazers essentially have the same team plus another draft pick who's not going to help. And also, that draft pick is not worth very much to other teams, too. They already know where the pick is going to land. It's not ultra super valuable. The mystique and the shine of a first round pick is that, it could be a top pick. So once the lotteries happen and you know that you're getting a 10th or 11th or 12th pick, teams are like, that's all right. So then that closes the door. It maybe doesn't shut the door, but it definitely, the hinges move like 70 degrees towards closing on Joe Cronin being able to use that pick with the player to swing a trade, to get someone who can help the Blazers right away and maximize Dame's prime. 10 minutes of getting to that point. But if the Blazers lose the games that they need to lose, maybe Josh Hart comes up with a bum ankle for a few, I would advocate that they pull anybody who they want to have rotation minutes next year, pull all of them and sit them down. Let the Trendon Watfords and the Greg Browns and the Brandon Williamses and the CJ Ellabys of the world get their playing time. And I that is what I would do, okay? Because if the Blazers do what they're supposed to do and lose a bunch of games, if they have a 40% chance of a top 4 pick, that's not guaranteeing they get a top 4 pick, but that's getting close to 50-50. And then imagine that things go totally the right way. And like, I just hit the sim lottery, and like, let's look at this scenario where the Blazers get the first pick and New Orleans has the 9th pick. So now the Blazers, instead of having the 12th or the 11th pick only, they now have the 9th and the 1st pick. The difference between those two scenarios is night and day, not only for being able to swing a trade, but also when you look at the top end talent that is in this draft. Again, Stephen Ryan did a great job last episode breaking all the players down, but I wanted to give just a moment to give some shine to my boy, the person with whom I'm setting up on an island, Chet Holmgren. You may follow me at GoldenPDX and notice my username is changed to Chet Holmgren Fan Club President. That's me, because Chet Holmgren, in my view, is going to be an All-NBA player. Let me rephrase that. Chet Holmgren will be an All-NBA player. Period. He's too talented. He's too coordinated. He's too smart. He's too tenacious to not be an All-NBA player. Most of the criticism that I've heard about Chet Holmgren is about his body. Yes, he's 7 feet tall. Yes, he weighs 195. No, that's not enough weight to play in the NBA. But he's a freshman. He's going to grow. And you can't teach coordination or speed or talent or tenacity or strength to weight or shooting or passing or dribbling. And he literally has all those skills. So when you look at Chet Holmgren, in my view, you're looking at an All-NBA talent, maybe not exactly next year, but soon. And also you're looking at a player who, according to Steve on last episode, has one of the most lopsided block to foul ratios, like approaching that of Anthony Davis when he was in college. The fact that he gets so many blocks and doesn't foul, that's not just because he's tall. That's not just because he fast twitch muscles. It's because of his coordination and his footwork and his positioning and his intelligence. He filters you to places that you don't want to be as an offensive player and then blocks the shit out of you. Dude had like 7 blocks last game. He had a bad game, or 2 games ago. He had a bad game last game and still had 4 blocks. And the way he does it is by positioning and by speed and the fact that he's super tall. My view is, next year, Chet Holmgren, even as thin as he is still going to be a deterrent around the rim that I don't even think you could question that. Like, the fit between him and Yusuf Nurkic is odd. And, you know, I have said, I don't think you should re-sign Yusuf Nurkic. I think you should let him go. Maybe the Blazers trade him. I don't know. Maybe Chet Holmgren isn't ready to play, like, you know, starter level minutes, and maybe he's like the backup big off the bench. And by the way, there are plenty of minutes there because Yusuf Nurkic only plays like 28 minutes a game. But in my view, Chet Holmgren next year, at a minimum, is someone who can shoot, is someone who can pass. He's a smart player. He has good vision. And he would probably be right away, even as thin as he is, at least a neutral, if not a slight positive on defense. And there's also the chance that he could be really good defensively immediately, despite him being skinny. So that's next year. To me, that is a player that the Blazers could take advantage of next year. I think he could play 15 to 20 minutes a game immediately next year. And again, yes, he's thin. I get that he's thin. Again, look at the highlights from last game when Gonzaga played Memphis, Penny Hardaway coaching that team. And yeah, like, there was one play where Chet Holmgren got knocked out of the way. That's totally fair. But then there were like 6 plays where he completely schooled that dude who was like 100 pounds heavier than him. He is faster than him. He was blocking the shit out of him. That's the player that is also going to show up in the NBA. And the biggest thing is what I would ask people to do before people create, and my cat just... We have a puzzle up on the table, and he just jumped on the table and swished his tail, and the piece... Anyway, RIP puzzle. What was I even saying? Chet Holmgren's great. I would ask people before they, you know, form a super strong opinion about him, please don't just look at these couple of games that Gonzaga is going to play in the tournament. Please go and look at game footage. And I think that this is a reasonable amount of time to spend. And I don't think that this is like unattainable for people to do, even if you're busy. 10 minutes, find footage, game footage, not highlights. Watch 10 minutes of game footage of Chet Holmgren playing. Again, not highlights, game footage. Watch how he moves. Watch his positioning. Watch his rebounding. Watch his defense. Watch his shooting. Watch his handles. I mean, that's the thing, is that this dude is so tall and thin. I mean, he looks taller. You know, he looks like he's 7'6" because of how thin he is. But his dribble, for being that tall, is like incredibly stable. And it's only going to get tighter over time. Just watch him play. Like, and again, like the thing that sold me on Chet Holmgren being an all-NBA talent is that he's completely fearless, totally tenacious, in the same way that we loved Zach Collins for, like, he would just like run into people and like he would take contact and all that stuff. Chet Holmgren does the same stuff, but he's more coordinated and he's a much better player. It doesn't matter that he's 195 pounds if he's willing to use all 195 of those pounds effectively, which he does. There are highlights of him pushing people out of the way that weigh much more than him because he's tenacious and he has balance and he has speed and he has really good positioning. And yes, there are also highlights of him getting pushed out of the way because he's light. That's completely fair. But my thing is, like, I mean, and I don't mean to compare them because they're both tall white dudes, but like the difference, like watching Myers Leonard play in college and all the way through his NBA career, he played super afraid. He played scared. He played scared of contact. He played scared of making mistakes. Even when he would get big dunks, he almost looked like he felt guilty for doing it. Chet Holmgren doesn't give a shit. He doesn't care if he gets knocked over. He doesn't care if he looks dumb. He doesn't care. He'll run into you. It doesn't matter. Like, that's something that you kind of like. Resiliency and power, or like tenaciousness or fearlessness, is something you can develop for sure. There's no doubt about that. I also think that there is an innate part of, like, you as a basketball player, if you're either afraid to take contact or not, it feels different. And I'll just let me make a personal anecdote. And look, I am not a super talented basketball player, but I played basketball my whole life and played organized basketball for a long time. So I can at least speak to like my personal experience and the mentality of like taking contact. That for me, I would go through these phases of being afraid to take contact and these and not being afraid to take contact. I remember really distinctly that, you know, even within a game, my mentality would switch back and forth. And I remember how it would feel like the kind of the thought processes your brain would go through, the synapses that would be firing. For example, if a ball went up and you were trying to get a rebound, the times when I was kind of afraid to roll my ankle or afraid to run into someone or afraid to get hit in the face, and the times where I was not, I was literally just focused on the ball and like, how can I get in best position? And surprise, I played at my best when I was just focused on the ball and not worried about getting hit. And like, but that for me personally was something that would kind of wave in and out. When you watch a player like Chet Holmgren, and when you watch a lot of NBA players who are fearless in that same way, you can tell that they don't struggle with that. You can tell that the entirety of their decision-making and their focus and their peripheral vision has everything to do with, I know where I want to go and I'm going to try everything I can to get there. And it all happens so fast. And I'm not doing a good job explaining this, but when you think about, like, take one basketball play, take a play in which you're on offense and your teammate shoots and the ball goes up and you're like, you want to get the rebound and the ball is up in the air and you're starting to like quickly make decisions in that half second that you have to like decide where to be. If all of your decisions are being filtered through, I'm afraid to get hit, you're going to move your body to protect yourself. You're going to get in a position that's safe. You're going to be kind of looking around to see where, you know, an elbow might be flying. And then the ball is doing something, right? All those micro decisions you've made in, like, again, like a quarter of a second, half second, have led to you being out of position. If you're totally fearless and the ball goes up, you're thinking about where you can get in front of someone, where you can protect the space so that your opponent can't get the ball. You can think about where the ball is going. And like, it's all of those micro decisions are being made and they all lead to you being in much better position a half second later. if you are completely and totally fearless and all of your decision making and your peripheral vision and your fast twitch muscles and kind of like the quick decisions you have to make because people are moving around on the court are all not being hampered by fear, if they're all not being affected by being afraid to get hit, then you get a player like Chet Holmgren who just looks fearless. You watch him play and you can see it, you can feel it. And that is the type of player that you want on your team. That is the type of player that you want on your team. He has it. Like, I did my best to explain what I think it is as far as like fearlessness. And I didn't do a good job. Again, maybe some notes would have helped here, but that is what he has that not all players have. You know he's always going to play hard. And I would also say, like, I haven't done like a deep dive into like if someone's done like a think piece where they like went and like interviewed his family and friends, and like I'm sure that like someone from The Athletic or is going to do that at some point if he gets drafted super high, which he's going to. I bet you what's going to come out is that he's also just like a relentless worker. I would not be surprised, therefore, that like part of work is like good sleep, good nutritional habits, good training habits, good weightlifting habits. I would not at all be surprised for Chet Holmgren to grow into his body because he's relentless. He cares about the game. He plays really hard and he takes all that stuff super seriously. So like, I mean, yes, there are players who've been very thin and tall and who have washed out in the league. There's no doubt about it. But I also think it's really wild when people are like, oh yeah, he's Sean Bradley 2.0. Then you've never watched him play. You've never watched him play if you're comparing him to Sean Bradley, like tall and skinny. Yes, that's where the comparison ends. He's so coordinated. He's so fast. He's talented, balanced, fearless. He can shoot, pass, vision, rebound, block, the whole thing. So all of this is just to say the reason why I changed my name on Twitter to Chet Holmgren Fan Club President is because Chet Holmgren will be an all-NBA player. If the Blazers are lucky enough to have him on the board, when they pick, they need to pick him. There is no sense, in my view, of picking a player who has a more NBA-ready body to maybe slightly help your team a little bit more right now, when most rookies are not even net positives right off the bat anyway, when you have all of this other depth on your team, when you can pick a player who can probably help a little bit next year and then can get much, much better. That's my view. That's my opinion. Take it or leave it. And that, I think, is about it. I am looking to see, I put a call on Twitter in case anyone wanted to join me on here, and I don't think anyone's going to take me up on it, which is completely fine. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So remember, if you care about the Blazers next year and beyond for the next, I mean, depending on who they draft, this could affect the next 5, 8, 10 years more. You want the Blazers to lose. They are playing the Pacers at 12:30. That's in 45 minutes. I really hope that by the time you listen to this podcast, they have lost that game, because if the Blazers lose today, that's a really, really good thing. And by the way, Chet Holmgren is great. That is it for today. If you want to reach out to us, you can always do that at WeLikeTheBlazers.com. You can also find us on Twitter at LikeTheBlazers. You can find me at GoldnerPDX. You can find Ryan Whitledge at TheWittyRyan. And that is it for now. I appreciate all of you. And again, one more time, like, it's awkward for me to be rooting for the Blazers to lose, but that's where we are right now. And I'm okay with it. And I hope that you're okay with it too. But it doesn't mean that we don't support the team. Of course we do. That's just the way things go sometimes. Appreciate you all. Thanks for checking in. And until next time, go Blazers.